I want to talk about a topic in this video that I don't think gets enough attention in the retirement space, and that's semi-retirement. Tell me if this ever sounds like you. Do you feel that you can't retire? That you don't have enough money saved? Or maybe you don't feel like you'll ever have enough money saved? The financial markets look too volatile to take a chance on retirement. Social Security won't cover all or most of your expenses. Inflation is eating everything alive, and it doesn't look like it's ever going to change. Side note, it's not going to. If that sounds familiar, I've got good news. Retirement is not an on or an off switch. It's not that simple. There's a powerful middle ground most people overlook, and that's semi-retirement. And for millions of Americans, it may be the smartest plan B that there is. I know a lot of people, the minute you say semi-retirement, they moan and groan. I don't want to hear that. Tell me how I can retire. I mean, I'm 60 years old, I have nothing, but I want to be able to retire. Tell me how I could do that. You need the tooth fairy, because there's no way you're going to be able to do that. And you better be looking at semi-retirement or some other options. Otherwise, you're going to work until the day you die. And that's why you need to be thinking about semi-retirement. And I don't mean to be critical of people in that situation, because there are a lot who are. I could have been in that situation myself, because I was essentially put out of the mortgage industry when I was 50 years old. That's a bad time to have your career crash and burn, but you have to just put your head forward, decide on a different course. And I always figured from that point on, okay, retirement's out of the question for me. I'll semi-retire. Well, things did get better, but I still like the semi-retirement idea. So let's talk about it. There's a problem with the traditional retirement model. We've been sold on a single version of retirement. You work full-time for 40 years, you hit some magic number, $1 million, $2 million, whatever the financial advisors tell you it's supposed to be. And then you walk away forever and you live a life of permanent peace. And they all lived happily ever after. In the real world, we would call that a fantasy, or better put, we would call it a fairy tale. And I think that that's best where it's left, because the model assumes stable careers for 30 or 40 years. That was true in the years after World War II. It's largely disappeared. Most people I know have multiple careers over their lifetimes. I thought it was just me. And the more I've met other people who are either retired, semi-retired, whatever, I'm finding that's a story all over the place. Predictable pensions, they're basically gone. Unless you work for the government, not many people have pensions anymore. Strong financial markets. Generally speaking, they've been for the last 40 plus years. But there have been times and even decades where things didn't look all that good. They called the early 2000s the lost decade in the stock market. And I think that was true. It assumes perfect health. You're never going to be hit with some sort of a major health event that's going to either derail your career, drain your bank account, whatever the case may be. Also, zero life interruptions. You're never going to lose your job. You're never going to have a business failure. You're never going to face a medical event. How many people do you know who have had all 5 of those situations in conjunction for the last 40 years? I know almost nobody. I'm not going to say, I shouldn't say nobody, because I do know a few, but the vast majority have had one of those issues in their lives at one time or another, and often multiples. And that's exactly the problem. The old model is breaking down. The stability of post-World War II America just isn't there anymore, and folks, it isn't coming back. I've studied this. I've heard the opinions of people who know more about it than I do, and I trust it isn't coming back. We've actually gone back to the way things were before World War II, which was a lot less settled. And people were on their own then, and today we're largely on our own. And as I often hear on the internet from different people, no one is coming to save you, and that's the best way to approach life at this point. The problem is, instead of adapting to the new reality, many people panic because they can't hit their magic number, their $1 million retirement portfolio. I'm here to tell you, please don't panic, because that's where semi-retirement comes into the picture as a possible plan B. What is semi-retirement? First of all, let's look at it in the most basic terms. It's not failure, and some people think that it is. Well, yeah, I'll semi-retire because I couldn't fully retire. No, you might find things are better that way. It also isn't I couldn't make it, because if it is, there are millions and millions of people in the same boat. It means working part-time instead of full-time. It's not a bad deal. Maybe you want to just sit and relax by the beach, but for the rest of your life. But if that's not an option, working part-time is not terrible. Consulting or freelancing. I've done freelancing. I did it for years. Honestly, ever since I left the mortgage business when I was 50, I feel like I've been semi-retired because of freelancing. I was doing freelance writing. And it was a full-time venture, but I had control of my time. I worked from home. I made good money, and I could control the flow of that money. That was the good thing. You can turn a hobby into an income. There are a lot of people. We have a program here in New Hampshire called Chronicle, and they spend a lot of time investigating small businesses that are started often by people who left the corporate world, and they start a bakery or a restaurant or a craft store, and they just they have a better work-life balance, and they don't have backgrounds that you would think would be conducive to that kind of a business, but they do it, and somehow it works. And some of those businesses become iconic, and they don't ever want to retire. Oftentimes you'll see people in their 50s, 60s, 70s running these businesses, and they're like perfectly content doing what they're doing because they did something else the rest of their lives, and they kind of knew what hell was, and this wasn't it. You could also start a small service business if you have skills. If you're a carpenter, if you're good with electrical work, plumbing, whatever. There's plenty of demand for that because there aren't enough plumbers, electricians, and carpenters out there. So if you can fix things or build things, you could have an occupation right there, and you can run it any way you like. You don't have a boss. There's no corporate structure. You could also work seasonally. I've done that, preparing income taxes. Obviously, probably like most people, I've worked retail at the holidays. I don't particularly like that one, but there are opportunities that are out there. Every season brings business and job opportunities. The point is, you can reduce your stress and your hours by working part-time, and you can keep at least some income flowing. For a lot of people, that's going to be the difference between semi-retirement and working the rest of their lives. So instead of needing $1.5 million invested, maybe you only need $300,000 or $400,000 because all you need to do is supplement your income. You don't need to have your investments cover the whole amount. That's a completely different math equation, one that requires a lot less preparation. If you notice, if you follow in the retirement space, the financial people who talk about these things will say, okay, using the safe withdrawal rate of 4%, you know you're going to need $80,000 in retirement. That means you need to build a $2 million portfolio. Somehow they always seem to miss the fact that most people have some other sources of income. First and foremost, Social Security. But some people do have pensions. Other people do plan to keep working in some capacity. They may not need $80,000. They may need $20,000 from their investments. If that's the case, they don't need $2 million. $500,000 will get the job done. The point is, you can retire sooner in that situation because it takes a lot less time to build up $500,000 than it does $1 million, and that's an important point. On the side income note, in case you think that you can't start a side business or do something new, this YouTube channel that you're watching right now is about exactly that. Just a little over 2 months ago, this YouTube channel did not exist. I started it on December 22nd officially, although for 24 hours, you're being verified by YouTube, so technically December 23rd. Now it has 20 videos up and running, over 1,500 subscribers, and well over 120,000 views. And it's already generated several $100s in advertising income to me. Again, didn't exist 2 months ago, and here it is. It took me a solid year to overcome my own fear of failure and to summon up the courage to even get the channel started. So I'm not claiming innocence here. I understand apprehension about these things. But once I got it up and running, it moved a lot quicker than I ever expected. And that's something I found out in my life. If you want to try something, do it. Even if it takes you longer to do it than you planned, just plunge in and do it. Because once you get things rolling, there are advantages that take place that come into the picture that you never even thought about. You couldn't have even imagined before you started. And all of a sudden, things start rolling. Today with the internet, there are resources out there you don't even know about. My point is, start something and plunge forward. If you're not retired yet, start something now. It might take you 2 or 3 years to get that something rolling. Do that before you're going to retire. And that way, when you retire, you'll have something to retire to. And it won't seem like work if it's something you really enjoy. I love doing these YouTube videos. I like to talk. You can tell that from the videos. But this is something that it's in my wheelhouse. I enjoy doing it. I've been thinking about doing it for years. And now I'm finally doing it. It really feels good. The moral of the story, don't be afraid to take chances in retirement or in semi-retirement. A better life is often on the other side of that chance that you're afraid to take. So why does semi-retirement work? First and foremost, it reduces portfolio pressure. This is the big problem with retirement for just about everybody. Coming up with that 7-figure retirement portfolio. That is, I don't care how easy the financial media makes that look. Well, if you start saving when you're 22 years old and you put away 10% of your income at 7% per year, by the time you're 65, you'll have $2.7 million. On paper, everything works. In real life, things often go off the rails. And I think that's most people's experience. Yeah, you're tooling along at the job for 5 years. You get laid off. There's $30,000 in your 401k. There's no job. What do? Like most people, you liquidate the 401k. Right there, you've lost 5 years. That's not good strategy, and anybody would recommend against it, but that's how real life works. If you need the money now, there's no future if you don't survive the present. So that's what you're going to do. Let's take an example. If you need $70,000 a year to live comfortably, but Social Security covers $35,000, you've got a part-time job or business bringing in $20,000, your investments only need to generate $15,000. That means you'll need a portfolio of about $350,000 to $400,000, not $2 million. That's a lot easier, and it changes everything, because it might make retirement at 62 possible, where if you had to wait for 7 figures, you might not retire till you're 75. Instead of drawing savings aggressively, you're going to preserve them because you're going to rely heavily on your earned income. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It's amazing. Like if you're counting on $40,000 in income above your Social Security and pension, and you can earn half of it, that means you can reduce your withdrawals from your portfolio by 50%. Your money's going to last longer. Another thing that a semi-retirement does is it protects you from market risk. When the market drops, fully retired investors feel trapped because their financial fortunes are tied to the market. Semi-retired individuals have flexibility. That's because they're not largely or fully dependent on the performance of their investments. If the market tanks, you can work a little more, delay taking withdrawals, maybe even suspend taking taking draws. And it also, if you don't have to take those draws out of your retirement savings, you can let your investments ride, and instead of selling securities at a loss so that you can take withdrawals, you can just let your portfolio go. You might decide, okay, I've got this part-time venture going, and while the market is being, having a fit, I'm going to take the next 6 months and maybe I'm going to go to full-time or something close to it and just ride that out and leave my money alone. That way, it's fully available to grow when the market starts going back on a growth path. That's flexibility, and it's powerful. Semi-retirement also helps mentally and emotionally. Let's be honest, a lot of people don't really want to do nothing. I know people who do sit around doing nothing in retirement. They just sit home and watch TV, and they're kind of boring. I don't want to be overly critical, but eventually you cut off from other people because you can't relate to them. I did a video on relevance, and this is where that comes in. The more that you're out there doing that you can do, the more relevant you are to people, the easier it is to talk to people, the more people find your conversations engaging. If you're going to sit around and do nothing, you've got nothing to offer people, or even yourself. I can't imagine a worse retirement than that. Right? I think that most people, I certainly fall into this category, want purpose in life, whatever that is. And the good thing about retirement or the retirement years is we can define that purpose. It's no longer driven by career or by necessity. We also want structure, some at least, not the way it was when you're working full time, but some kind of structure that gets you out of bed in the morning, gives you a reason to get up, gives you something to get excited about, a purpose. Interaction with people. When you're working, you're going to interact with people. There's no way around that. That can be bad too if you don't really like people. I like people. I would rather interact with people, even if it's in a professional environment. And finally, there's the opportunity to continue making some kind of contribution. I learned years ago that I wasn't just working for money. I was working because this is my purpose in life. This is my God-given ability, that I'm delivering a product or a service to a world that needs it. And you know that the world needs it because you're being paid for it. That's the evidence. So don't underestimate what you're doing. I don't care if you're cleaning toilets. And I'm not demeaning that, because I did that in my younger days. I had a job where I was cleaning 110 toilets a week. So somebody was paying me for it. It was a job that needed to be done. It was, at the time, my contribution to the human race. I should have felt better about that than I did. But any kind of work that you do should feel good. Semi-retirement provides both income and identity, and that's a key. And that matters more than most financial planners will admit. Who is semi-retirement perfect for? I would say just about anybody, but it's ideal if you're short of your retirement number, which I think describes 97% of the population who don't have $1 million stashed away in a retirement plan. It's also good for people who enjoy staying active. You're worried about outliving your money. That's the number one concern of retirees. And if you're semi-retired, you're continuing to earn some income, which means you're relying less on your investments, and that means you can kind of sandbag them for later on. And that means it's less likely you're going to run out of money. Also, somebody who's lost their job in their 60s, that can be more difficult than you think. So we often think, okay, you're in your 60s, you're in the retirement years. Well, it's not so bad for you. You just retire. A lot of people aren't ready to retire, particularly the early 60s. Let's say you're 62 and you've been planning for years to retire at 67 or 70 because you need more Social Security, you need more time to let your investments grow. You get a pink slip at 62, your whole game just changed. Semi-retirement might be the bridge that gets you from here into full retirement at a later date. Also, for people who want flexibility and not a full shutdown, I think that describes more people than we think. It's especially powerful for people in their early 60s who weren't quite ready, either financially or emotionally, to stop working entirely. I want to relate a story here. I know a lot of people think of, if you're working part-time, well, you're not really retired. Okay, be that as it may. We have a friend who retired at 62, and she's single. So she went on kind of a serial part-time job plan where over 20 years she held 22 different part-time jobs. Some of them were seasonal, some of them were contract, some of them were more challenging, some of them were just fun. But she's telling us about this, and she's glowing as she does. She did all kinds of jobs, and just jobs that were fun. Like right now she's working in a live theater. She really enjoys that. But she's had jobs where, she was in charge of events or something like that. Just things she never did during her career. It was an opportunity to spread her wings in different ways. This woman in her 80s is one of the most interesting people you'll ever meet. And she just bubbling with enthusiasm. And she's socially connected. She could probably talk shop with just about anybody in any career. So that's just a good example of a good example. Let's talk about what semi-retirement is not. It's not working 40 hours or working forever. You want to be careful with semi-retirement that you could get pulled back into full-time. My wife works a part-time job. She used to be when she worked full-time, she was an assistant manager in a jewelry store. Now she's working 10 or 12 hours a week. She always loved selling jewelry, hates being in management, but loved selling jewelry. So she just does that. Doesn't do management. Sometimes she gets pressed into some things, but she mostly sells, and she really, really loves that. And it's only 10 or 12 hours a week, but they're always trying to get her to work more hours. Can you take an extra shift? Can you work on Saturday? Can you stay till 9 o'clock? And she learned to say no and to mean it. And that's keeping a control on it. So you don't want that to get out of control, because it can. In almost any job, they always need people, especially people who are steady and good at what they do. You don't want to be grinding at a job that you hate. If it's some occupation you really don't work, probably you want to leave your current employer, unless it's work that you actually like doing. Maybe they'll allow you to work part-time. Maybe they'll allow you to come in as a consultant, whatever. But it's got to be in a reduced capacity. And it can't be one of these things where you're constantly under pressure. You had that when you were working full time. You don't need it now. It's definitely not about delaying joy indefinitely. You want to make sure you have that work-life balance that you were never able to achieve when you were working full time. So now maybe you want to work 20 or 15 hours, maybe only 10, whatever it is. You want to balance between how much money you need and how much leisure you want. But you have to emphasize the leisure because you are at that point. And I know myself, I'm in my 60s. I don't want to work 40 hours a week. I don't want to do anything hard. I want to do things that I like. Semi-retirement at its core is intentional downsizing of work, and it's work on your terms. Remember that. You control the hours, the type of work you do. If you don't like one kind of work, go do something else that you think you might like. You also control the workload. You don't let them load you up with 12 hours of work in an 8-hour day. That was your past. This is your present. It's a different world. You don't need it. Also, you don't want anything really stressful. I mean, there's some stress in any kind of work you do, but you don't want anything where stress is a part of the job. I've worked in jobs like that. I'm sure you have as well. That gets old fast and it never goes away. I don't care how much they say, well, it's going to get better. It's not going to get better. That's just the nature of the job. That's very different from traditional employment, and that's how you have to view it. I think personally, semi-retirement is fast becoming the new retirement reality. Because here's the truth. The 21st century retirement model is failing. That worked really well in the decades after World War II, but it's been breaking down in the last 20 years or so. The 21st century model looks more like this. When you hit retirement age, you're going to work less. You're going to earn some money. You're going to withdraw some from your retirement savings. You're going to adjust as needed. And you're always going to be fluid and flexible because even in retirement, you never know what's coming down the pike. For many people, it's far safer than the hard stop at 65. It gives you the ability to get into retirement gradually, and I think that'll work better for more people. Final thoughts. If you can't retire the way the financial industry says you should, please don't think of it as a failure. Maybe it's freedom wrapped in a different package. Semi-retirement isn't plan B because you messed up. It's plan B because life doesn't work the way it does on spreadsheets. You're dealing with real life. And if you get to 62 or 65 and you're not ready, go to plan B. It's perfectly okay. It's your life. Sometimes the smartest move isn't stopping completely. It's just shifting gears. If semi-retirement resonates with you, let me know in the comments. Would you consider semi-retirement? Or are you aiming for a full stop retirement, no work at all, no matter what? I think personally, retirement today requires flexibility, not fantasy. What's your plan B if full retirement isn't an option in your life? If you like the video you're watching, hit the like button below and subscribe to the channel. And thank you for watching.